Hi everyone, welcome back to Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics. Today we're working on a 2013 GMC Acadia that the owner drove all the way from West Virginia for me to look at it. It's through a YouTube reference, so that's pretty cool. I guess YouTube's kind of like advertising too, huh? But anyways, the issue with this vehicle, it's very intermittent. So it's happened twice to her in the last, I don't know, couple months, I guess. She said that first time it happened, it ran fine during the day. She left it in a store parking lot, do some shopping, comes out an hour later, turns the key on, and up here it said reduce power. And then when she went to crank the engine, nothing happened. So it has a regular ignition key, turn it to crank, and it's a smart system, it'll crank for as long as it needs to, and the car did not start. So then what she did, the first time it happened, I think they disconnected the battery, let it sit for a little while, reconnected it, and everything worked. Okay, and the problem didn't happen for another few weeks. And the second time it happened, it was on a cold start, and the same thing, reduced engine power, and she went to crank it, it did not crank. So it's a no start, no crank. And then that time, there's a difference here. They hooked up another vehicle thinking the battery might have been low, and she said it fired up once the other vehicle was hooked up to the battery. Like, that just kind of, a lot of variables there. One time you disconnect the battery, system resets, okay, but how would jump starting the vehicle help, help the vehicle start? So I'm going to scan it for codes right now. If we don't get any, she already had this car to several shops, I think the dealer and another independent shop, and they did manage to pull some codes out of it at the time, but they couldn't reproduce the problem. So if we don't get any codes right now, I'll show you the list that she provided me, and hopefully we can make a game plan and find this very intermittent problem, because the pressure's on, all the way from West Virginia here. I got to try to make this happen. So we'll see where it goes. So we got the launch to auto ID the vehicle. It is a 2013 GMC Acadia Denali front wheel drive. I guess this vehicle is actually originally from Texas, so no rust. Woo! So we're not looking for a bad ground, right? It's got the 3.6 liter direct injection V6. So let's move forward here. Let's do a quick test. I want to scan all the systems and see if there are any codes. So here's the complete scan. So there's 3 pages of modules here, starting from the engine control module, no fault. Nothing. Fuel pump control module, transmission, BCM, digital radio receiver. We have a fault in the driver's door switch. Not too worried about that. HVAC control module, fault. Again, not worried about that. Keep going down the line here. It failed to scan the personal audio link module. And no faults anywhere else. And that's it. Vehicle theft deterrent, vehicle comm interface, and EBCM, no faults. So I guess there are only 2 modules that have faults in them, the driver's door switch and the HVAC. Just for kicks, let's go into those and see what the fault is. B393B. Please refer to service manual, state open. Okay, not worried about that at all. And let's go back to our list and see what driver's door switch wanted to do. Sometimes the launch is a little slow. Okay, front door window motor calibration not learned. Again, not worried about that. So no codes to go by right now. So that list that she gave me will be very critical in this diagnosis. So let's see that list and maybe go online and do some research. Alright, here's the list of trouble codes that the other shop pulled when it was still in memory. Let's start with a P0606 control module internal performance. Now I'm not exactly sure if this was specific to the FPCM, the fuel pump control module, or the ECM, and we'll take a look at that code in a little while. A P069E FPCM request check engine light on. That's very interesting. A P2534 FPCM ignition switch 1 circuit low voltage. That's also very suspicious right there. Let's keep going here. B1527 parasitic load. C0242 ECM indicated TCS malfunction due to reduced power. So I think once it's in reduced power mode, it'll set some codes. So this one might be an effect, not a cause. Let's see, a B0081 passenger presence module malfunction. U0170 lost comm with restraint system sensor. That's for the passenger presence system. These two, she said she did have some problems with the airbag light or something, but that was taken care of. There are no issues with it at this time. So the codes we want to focus on are these three right here, having to do with the fuel pump control module. So that is very good direction. Now I did look up some information, did some research, and there's actually a recall on the fuel pump control module for some of these vehicles, but I did call the dealer and gave him the VIN, and they said that it doesn't apply to this Acadia. But it doesn't mean that the fuel pump control module isn't like good, but they wouldn't replace it for free. So again, we actually have to do the diagnosis instead of saying, hey, here's a recall, replace it and see if it gets better. That wouldn't be fun anyways, right? So let's do some research on these three codes here. Maybe get some wiring diagrams out and go from there. Also a quick look at this recall that I found doing some research. There it is, 2009 to 2014 GMC Acadia, and the condition is, let's see here, so contamination in the chassis control module caused electrical short. Vehicle could display check engine light, stall, or fail to start. Same stuff. We're supposed to replace modules, and the fun part is right here. Once we find our vehicle, let's see here. So 2013 to 2014 GMC Acadia, module fuel pump flow control. So it says in here that the recall applies, but apparently this VIN does not. In any case, now let's go to all data, look up these codes, and go from there. So first code, this P0606 for the FPCM. So that says this control module internal performance. It's an internal fault, within the module. No external circuits are involved. So when it's powered up, it runs this test. Has detected an internal malfunction. Diagnostic aids. So verify that code is not set. If it is set, then program the FPCM, but that's not the case here. It says if DTCs are set, reprogram FPCM. If DTCs reset, replace the FPCM. Okay, so it's not really that helpful. So let's look up some other codes. Now this 606, again, I don't know if it was set in the ECM or the FPCM, but it's a very similar thing. Let's see here. Action taken when DTC sets. It's type A DTC. Low voltage or momentary loss of power or ground to the ECM may cause the DTC to set. So that's a clue. So again, if it fails again, replace the module. Nothing very specific. Our next code is a 069E. So you can find that guy. So this code right here, it's just basically the fuel pump control module requesting the check engine light be turned on, just because that module sensed a problem and it wants to notify you. So in this case, again, you get scan the fuel pump control module. Verify there are no fuel pump control module DTC set. So you have to go into a separate menu there. And DTC set, all okay. Alright. So these two codes, again, not super helpful. But this one, 2534, FPCM ignition switch 1 circuit low voltage. That one right there, I think, will be the one to focus on to narrow down this problem. Alright, P2534. Let's see. Ignition switch 1 circuit, low voltage. So, monitors the ignition voltage circuit to determine if, well, I guess we don't know when that ignition voltage comes on, but usually it's when you turn the key to the on position. So if it's less than 6 volts, we'll set this DTC, and so on and so forth. Okay, here we go. They want you to disconnect the harness at the FPCM, test for greater than 11 volts between the ignition voltage circuit terminal 15 and ground. Now why is that not a good test? Do they want you to load the circuit maybe? So unplug the component and put something in there. I don't know, maybe a test light or a load pro or something. But that's what I would do. Or leave the component plugged in and just back probe that circuit and monitor your voltage. It says if all circuits test normal, replace the FPCM. So this is interesting. If less than the specified voltage, test ignition voltage circuit for short to ground or an open high resistance. If the circuit tests normal and the ECM ignition fuse 58 is open, test the voltage circuit for short to ground. If the circuit tests normal, test to replace the run crank relay. So that right there, that's what we'll focus on. We need a wiring diagram for this FPCM to see what controls this ignition 1 circuit. However, even if we unplug the fuel pump control module, that would not explain our no crank condition. So in this case, asking the customer very specific questions when the problem is this intermittent is, I can't stress that enough. We need to know what, when this problem occurred. Was it hot? Was it cold? What happened? Was it a crank no start or was it a no crank no start? And combining that information with the codes that the other shop pulled, I think we'll be able to make a game plan on what exactly we need to check. Because we can't just dive right in, and because there's so many variables, everything's connected, everything talks to each other. We need to be very specific in our testing. And that's where that diagnostic time comes in. So now we're looking up some wiring diagrams on my favorite BBB Industries, just because they give you all the diagrams in one file and it's easy to scroll up and down. You don't need to zoom in on any specific page. So, to print them out one by one, we'll just look at this whole document in one sitting. So, let's see here. Let's find our fuel pump control module first. Oxygen sensors, ignition coils, got more ignition coils, camshaft position sensors. Okay, there's a high pressure fuel pump, so this is direct injections. Let's see, fuel pump controls, it's even labeled right there. There's our fuel pump control module, awesome. So let's look at what this thing takes. There's our fuel pump. It has a fuel pressure sensor that talks to the FPCM, then a whole bunch of data lines right there. Engine control module is connected to this wire, and then right here we have our power sources. So there's a 25 amp fuse, battery positive, hot at all times, red and white wire. And then this one right here is the one we're worried about, ignition. It comes from a fuse and it should be high. I guess it comes from the ignition main relay. So PCM ignition 10 amp fuse in the underhood fuse box. So we're going to write that down. And pin 15, it's a pink wire. That's where we want to focus. So back to, let's see here, circuit terminal 15. So that's the one that this code's set for. 2534 code is set when the FPCM expects to see 12 volts or battery voltage on this ignition voltage circuit, terminal 15, and it does not. But how may you ask, would that cause a no crank? Well, let's keep looking at this wiring diagram and see what else this fuse might feed. So again, PCM ignition 10 amp fuse. What's helpful is if we go to a power distribution wiring diagram. Let's go wiring diagrams, electrical distribution, power distribution. So we're looking for that PCM ignition 10 amp fuse coming from a relay. So let's see here. All of this accessory stuff. Alright, here we go. EC1, even coils, odd coils. Let's keep going here. Okay, we reached the end of that. Let me look at the other documents. Okay, so look at the heading here, ignition 1 and 2. That's what we're after. So let's scroll down, try to find that PCM ignition fuse. So right here I see ignition main relay, and then there is the fuse we're worried about, PCM ignition 10 amp. And it also has a transmission fuse, HSW, airbag. So the thing is, if, let's say, if this relay was intermittent or bad, then you would think we would set codes on other things like airbag, transmission, I don't know what HSW means, but we need to know where, what's downstream of here. Alright guys, this is the money diagram right here. Ignition switch, airbag, HSW, PCM ignition, and transfuses. So there's our ignition main relay, and here are the 4 fuses, and we can see what they feed. So, for example, well, here's our PCM ignition 10 amp fuse. Now it comes down here and it feeds 2 things: the fuel pump control module, which set the code, and then our engine control module. So let's say we had an intermittently bad contact at this fuse, right? We would definitely set the code in the fuel pump control module. Now, would that cause a no crank if we take that power feed away from the ECM? So that that might be the first experiment that we do, is pull this fuse, try to crank it, and see what codes set. See if the ECM wakes up, see if we get reduced power. If we can recreate these symptoms, then that will be a great step in the right direction for sure. If something completely different happens, then I guess we'll go to this fuel pump control module and even unplug it and see if the engine cranks with the FPCM unplugged. So let's go to the vehicle, find this PCM ignition 10 amp fuse in the underhood fuse box, and yank it out. So you open the hood, and this is too funny. There's just like plastic. It's all you see. The only thing that is accessible is luckily our fuse box, and got it unclipped here. Let's see. 10 amp. Looking for, where is it? ECM, PCM. Does anybody see it? Okay, I found it. It's this top fuse. Let's see, right there. PCM ignition 10 amp. That's this guy right here. So I'm just gonna unplug it. Visually looks fine. Let's leave it in the box. Let's see what happens when we turn the key. So, key on. Hood open. Should we close the hood? Just a sec. Alright, key on. Ice possible, drive with care. Try to crank it. Nothing. We don't get the reduced power message. Nothing when you turn the key to crank. We're not getting the what we want. So let's go back to our scanner and see if we set any codes. No trouble code, system normal. What about the FPCM? FPCM. Dang. Didn't set anything there either. So I guess our direction changes a little bit. We definitely got a no crank, but it's not setting any trouble codes because I guess if there's no power to the the ECM and the FPCM, then I guess they're in sync. They're not like, oh, I have power but you don't, so let's set a trouble code. Not the case. So let's think of a next logical step.